Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome. After a gap of 2 months, we're back doing another music sharing session. And it's a beautiful, bright, crisp December morning here in sunny Kent. Christmas market's happening.
Yeah. Places full of dogs.
Lots of dogs.
And a goose.
And a goose. Goose on a lead. So,
this is pre-Brexit Britain.
Yes.
Geese on a lead.
That's it. It's only going to get better after this, or maybe worse. We don't know. We kicked off our session. Absolute killer tune from this compilation. The title of this compilation, which you can probably just about see, it's called Time Is Right. And this came out, I think, in the late 80s. Wow. The track is by MCB. And it's got one of those rhythms where you can't quite place where the one is at the beginning. Fantastic sort of slap bass groove. MCB, The Time Is Right. Absolute killer tune.
Sounded really good.
Yeah.
Never actually seen it in any form apart from on that compilation.
No.
Then moved over to just something about the rhythm of that reminded me of this album, Herbie Hancock album, which is actually, I have to say, not a great album. It's Rod Temperton, who is normally great, but mostly on this it seems to be some of not his best tunes. But there's a wonderful track called, there's two really great tracks on it, but a track called Give It All Your Heart, which is a kind of Herbie on vocoder with also backing vocoders from Patrice Rushen. It's just a nice mid-tempo soulful track with a very nice long coda to it as well.
Lovely piano solo.
With a great piano solo at the end of it.
Yeah.
So almost, just joking, it almost sounds like Herbie's showing off because Patrice is in the room.
Right, well, I have to say I don't normally engage with Black Friday, but I did notice that this album, which I've been after for a long time, which originally was a Japanese-only pressing, and it was one of those direct to wax recordings. So I think, there was no sort of particular mastering. I think it just went straight from the source.
Yeah.
And this is a 1978 album that features Herbie again, so it's called Direct Step. Herbie Hancock, Paul Jackson, Alphonse Mouzon, Ray Obiedo,
Webster
Lewis, yeah, and yet another amazing version of Butterfly. It's also got a version of Shiftless Shuffle and then a whole side of I Thought It Was You. But the actual mastering and sound is fantastic. So catch this while you can.
That's one of the best drum and bass sounds of any record I've ever heard.
Yeah.
As well. From Herbie to the band Quasar, who were one of the break-off bands from the Mothership, from George Clinton's Mothership. This one featured Glenn Goins and I think that's how you pronounce his name, and Jerome Braley, the drummer, Bigfoot as he was known. And this is a random track I heard. I think I was listening to WFMU or somewhere, one radio station in the States, and they suddenly played this track, Starlight Circus, off here, which I didn't hear the introduction and thought it was a unknown Thundercat track. Actually, it sounds kind of very. I mean, it's not a funk track at all. It's like a mid-tempo kind of spacey thing. Anyway, it's a great album. It's quite hard to find. I think it might have been reissued now, actually. But most of it's heavy-duty funk, actually. But the second side's got a number of kind of interesting tunes on it, really. They broke up because Glenn died very soon after the record was originally made. Came out in Arista in 1978.
There's going to be a number of shout-outs to people in the VC and who've turned us on to various tunes. This is a record that John and I both picked up, I think, on the basis of Chris Cole, John Coltrane 68's recommendation. It's an album by Terry Plumeri. It's called He Who Lives in Many Places. It was actually recorded in 1971 and came out in, I think, 1974 or 75. And it's very much like if you crossed the Mawandishi Herbie period with the Miles Bitches Brew period, you'd get something that sounds a bit like this album. Features Terry on acoustic bass, Herbie on keyboards, John Abercrombie electric guitar, Eric Gravatt, who's been a feature on Weather Report stuff on percussion, drums, Michael Smith on drums as well, and Paul Martin on acoustic guitar. We listened to a very moody track called Time Worm.
It's a great record. I mean, I play it quite a lot, actually. It's also not too expensive. I mean, it was obviously an independent release, but it's not too expensive to pick up, actually, which is good. Keeping with that kind of spacey early 70s kind of feel, played a track off Herbie Mann's Stone Flute, which has a very unusual band with Herbie on flute and Sonny Sharrock on guitar, Roy Ayers on vibes. I don't think there are many on records together. Either Ron Carter or Miroslav Vitus on bass, and Bruno Carr or on drums. Or Mickey Roker's also on this as well. And it's good. This is kind of quite different to a lot of Herbie's stuff, but it's much more, it's not quite so much in the kind of soul jazz vein. It's much more a kind of moody kind of spacey stuff, and played 2 tracks back to back, which are in Tangier and Paradise Beach.
Very nice segue from Terry. Very nice segue from Terry
on here as well. Yeah. So I need to get a better copy of this. So this is a bit ropey, this one. And it came out on Herbie's own label.
Well, the connection with this is, of course, Roy Ayers, who featured on the previous album, and this is one of Roy's best solo albums with the Ubiquity band, and it's called Vibrations. And this album features either Dennis Davis or Bernard Purdie on the drums, Edwin Birdsong's on here, some of the some great players, but just some amazing grooves. And we listened to the track called One Sweet Love to Remember, which again has one of those grooves where you're not quite sure where the one was or where the one is. Just totally sort of syncopated funk and jazz in a deep groove. Really nice.
Stepping up the groove a bit into something a bit more frenetic, really. Got stuck, as I'm sure many people do, doing a deep dive into YouTube video clips of Michel Ndegeocello. And this is not Michel, this is the Screaming Headless Torsos, which is a band led by David Fuzanitsky from the guitarist. But most of his band actually at different times have been the backup band for Michel. Also, there's kind of a lot of fluidity between the different bands as well. And this was a live album recorded. I saw this band live in New York. In fact, the cover's signed by the band, in fact. And they're just fantastic live. And they usually go out about once every 2 years and play a live tour. Really high energy funk and jazz and all kinds of everything thrown in, really.
Yes.
Pretty much. So incredible musicians. And played the track Smile in a Wave. Sorry, Blue and Green off here, which also features bits of Night in Tunisia and God knows what else. But amazing musicians, just having a great time.
Yeah,
I think as well.
And David Fuzanitsky has a very easy to remember guitar style. I knew it was within about the first second.
Yeah, that's right. If they're ever live, fortunately they come to Europe very rarely, but if they're ever live, just go and see them. It's just a real fantastic thing.
This album, I think we've probably shown before. Quite often, John will show something, or I'll show something, and we'll end up, buying the record.
It's subliminal.
Subliminally. This is a beautiful reissue of Le Grand Jazz, Michel Legrand, playing with a just incredible array of musicians, actually, including Herbie Mann, in fact. Also Miles, John Coltrane, Phil Woods, Bill Evans, Ben Webster. The list goes on and on and on. Different sort of lineups for different tracks, and
incredible lineups.
And incredible recording, and we listened to an amazing kind of big band version of Night in Tunisia. That was it's just a really beautiful reissue that's come out.
Sounds very different to the original, actually. It's kind of interesting, much more spacious kind of sound. Actually. The original almost sounds like mono, but just kind of. Thinking of that kind of a great arranging, really, and great playing, went for some Gil Evans. You never go wrong with Gil Evans. I think this was actually the first album he put out under his own name, actually. 1957, this was. A kind of amazing, you can really hear his kind of talent on this. It's on Prestige label. He's got a small band. It's only hence the name, it's only like a 9-piece band. But it sounds like it's an orchestra, actually. His arranging is so skillfully done. We played the track Remember off here, and that features Steve Lacy on soprano saxophone. He was very young when this came out. Paul Chambers is on the record. Loads of good people as well. It's a really nice record on the Prestige label.
Yeah, sound really beautiful again, sort of wide widescreen sound.
Widescreen sound with 10 people.
Yeah, amazing. Right. Oh, I've been to Faversham Market yesterday, and this is something I had on a CD, but it's just reminded what a great track. Call Me, SWV, Timbaland production, Missy Elliott on the rap, and yeah, sort of from 1997, I think it is, or yeah, it's sort of 20 plus years old, and fantastic sound. Just love the sound of what was happening at that particular period in the late 90s, and just great to have it on vinyl, and it cost £1.
I was listening to some new stuff from Missy Elliott. Actually, sounded good. Actually, yeah, I think she was great. Really underrated, I think. Then went really random, almost random. Actually, I heard that again. I was listening to some obscure American FM station and heard Michel Ndegeocello's version of "Compared to What" with Terence Blanchard band, and which is a very odd. It's a great tune, a great version, but it has a very odd, weird middle section where Michelle gets incredibly funky for about 40 seconds in the middle of the whole thing. It's kind of, you want to hear more and more. And the weird thing was, it's from the soundtrack of the film Talk to Me, but it's actually not even in the film. So why it's on this particular CD, who knows actually. But it's a great track actually.
Really nice.
And you can track it down just about on YouTube and have a listen to it. But it's worth. I think I paid about 20 pence or something for this CD. It's worth 20p.
Second VC shout out to the 6-inch pianist, to John from Birmingham, and he showed, I think it was John who showed this, Billy Paul's Going East album, and particularly pointed out his version of the Eugene McDaniel's track Compared to What. Very different version, very, very sort of funky version actually, really great. Yeah, with a bit of a sort of Stars on 45 tribute to contemporary soul music at one stage towards the end. But this is a great album. I love the track East as well. So there's a lot more to Billy Paul than Me and Mrs. Jones as well.
Yeah. So. What's the other album with a weird psychedelic cover on it as well, which he did, which is really cool.
Oh, yes, with two heads. Or
yeah, that's a great album.
That is a great album,
yeah, interesting time, actually. Then we went epic, actually, and kind of one of the best things that's happened since our last session was not actually a record at all, but it was getting an email from Pat Metheny where he talked about his new forthcoming release in February. And just kind of really interesting. You just suddenly realise that we get marketed at all the time, really, for music, and just having somebody talking to you like an intelligent human being is quite nice. So anyway, in tribute to that, and also to Jan-Erik Kronhaug, who was the engineer on all the ZCM records, who sadly died since our last session as well. Pulled out 8081, which is Pat Metheny with Charlie Hayden, Jack DeJohnette, Julie Redman and Mike Brecker, and played two folk songs, which is kind of epic track. I mean, phenomenal drumming from Jack DeJohnette.
Oh, yes.
And an absolutely barnstorming solo from Michael Brecker, which I originally thought was Julie Redman, actually.
I have to say a big shout out to Ben Costello, who gave me this album as some VCLT.
Oh, really?
Years back.
Great.
Yeah.
Good choice there.
Yeah, very good choice. I've been getting quite into floating points, and I think I must have been listening to an interview with Sam Shepard, who basically is Floating Points, and he played this track, which is by Crustacean. And I think this is his own label, Melodies International, and we listened to the track Flame, the Borderline Insanity dub mix, and it's just some really dense, layered, grooving techno, I guess, from the late 90s. That I'd missed this track when it came out, but it sounds fantastic and it's a great pressing. So Crustacean, Flame
from Bristol.
And
I remember the connection actually.
Not DJ Crust.
Not DJ Crust. No, I met the guy who was Crustacean because he was playing with Adrian Utley.
From Portishead.
From Portishead, yeah. So that's a connection. This is something I showed a couple of years ago at a session actually, but I still find myself listening to it a lot. Really unusual kind of dub record by Sly and Robbie, but a recent one came out about 2 or 3 years ago. So it's like a modern dub record, actually, which doesn't sound that promising, but actually sounds great. I mean, they've done a lovely job on it. Just epic. It's already test your speakers out, this record, actually. I mean, there's some huge kind of bass sounds coming through this thing as well. But yeah, kind of almost doesn't make sense in a way to do a kind of contemporary without any attempt to try and make it sound like a traditional roots thing at all. But it really kind of works, actually. Very good record, and came out of nowhere, really, and nobody's ever done anything like it before or since, I think, actually. A little bit like some of Laswell's stuff, I get. But more.
I tell you, the other thing I was thinking is an album which I don't have, which I would love, is Creation Rebels, Starship Africa.
Yeah, yes, a little bit in that kind of vibe.
Kind of futuristic.
Yeah, they're really good, actually, and it kind of sounds like the cover, actually, a bit. So.
Yeah, I've been sort of getting into a few reggae 10 and 12 inches, slightly addicted to the Sounds of the Universe emails, which keep telling me that they've got some killer 7-inch, 12-inch or 10-inch, which I'm inevitably suckered to buying.
Expensive habit.
It's an expensive habit, but there could be worse habits. This is on the Pressure Sounds Justice label, and it's a couple of versions of the Nice Time rhythm, which Don McCarlos, that's an absolute killer tune, one of my favourite late night blues. Nice Time is the original track. We listened to Bandulo Rock, which had a lovely horn line for this tune, which I'd not heard before, and is nicely dubbed towards the end. And there's two versions on each side of the 10-inch.
It's got a picture of Yabby You inside the cover as well.
It has, yes.
Which is quite
that
nice.
Was really interesting. Don't know if you can see that, but yeah, Yabby You is on the inside.
Pressure Sounds was the label started by Adrian Sherwood to re-release kind of classic stuff alongside his own new things.
There you
go. Then went for this is a kind of oddity. This record, it's a double album that came out on Trojan, and it's got the original kind of 2-track masters of the first kind of versions of most of the Wailers tunes.
The Lee Perry Productions.
Lee Perry Productions, yeah. Really stripped down sound on them, and played the Sun is Shining version of it, which is kind of really weird spectral version with virtually no rhythm on it, actually. It's a kind of dull thud in the background. But yeah, it's easy to find this, actually. I think Mark said it's got such a horrible cover, which is probably why it didn't sell very well. But fascinating kind of bit of kind of archaeology in here as well. Really nice stuff.
So we listened to another Bob Marley track, but in a very different style. This is the Charlie Hunter Quartet. So Charlie Hunter, who is the 8-string guitarist who plays bass and rhythm and lead all at the same time on his guitar. And he did this great CD of Bob Marley covers, but done in a completely different style.
Which sounds like it's going to be not very good. But
yeah.
In fact, it's great.
Absolutely great. We listened to his version of Rebel Music. Sounded absolutely fantastic. Don't know if it's out on vinyl, possibly not.
No, unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff from that whole period which never came out on vinyl, which is a shame, I think, actually. Then went for this, which was
track of the session for me,
which was John Martin's album after Solid Air, and I think never got as enough attention because of that.
So weird.
And this, I can't remember what I either heard it or played it randomly, was the track Look In off the second side of this record. And maybe I heard somebody talking about the production on it, but the production on this record is unbelievable, actually. I mean, Solid Air sounds pretty great, but this has a weird soundstage. Almost, as Mark said, it almost sounds like it comes outside the speakers.
Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary, actually. It's great. I mean, it's got some of my favourite John Martin songs on this, but the track Look In just sounds extraordinary. It could have been made now, actually. Yeah. So we can't really go wrong with John Martin, but this is a great one.
Yeah, and a neglected album, I think.
Very much so.
Yeah. Just noticed my shrink has come off a bit here. Anyway, John often, regularly does amazing CDs for me, which he hands to me at some stage during a session. And I was listening back to a CD that had an incredible version of Mother Nature's Son, the Beatles track, by Ramsey Lewis. And I just thought, actually, I've really got to get this album. So I went hunting, and it's a Charles Stepney production from about 1970, I think, 1969. Again, an album that you might think wouldn't be very good. You know, Ramsey Lewis doing a whole album's worth of Beatles covers, but the the arrangements kind of almost out George Martin. They're quite amazing. Sort of lush, dynamic, epic. Yeah, visceral, great sort of playing from Ramsey Lewis. Highly recommended if you don't know this album.
I mean, they're kind of like orchestral arrangements.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just full. Charles Stepney just throws everything in.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I don't often go for artist compilations, but this has always been one of my favourites. This is a selection of OJ's material from, as you can see, from 1972 through to 1973 through to 1982. So it's the whole of the Fiddy kind of period, really. But this album's all mid-tempo ballads, actually, which are kind of great to listen to, actually. And played Ship Ahoy, which is a kind of 9-minute epic, really, actually, about slavery, which is, I mean, the idea that people never used to make music about issues is a bit nonsensical, really. So this came out, Charlie Records in the UK. I don't think it was probably available anywhere else as well. But it's just got a really good selection of mid-tempo ballads on here.
So we were going a bit soulful, and somebody who I think is very sort of under-recognised in the soul world is Willie Hutch. And this is an album called Fully Exposed, which sort of came to through a weird circuitous route to do with what's the name of the psychedelic Bible of late 60s, early 70s music that you turned me on to?
Galactic Ramble.
Galactic Ramble. The guy who runs Galactic Ramble has got a new website, which is a sort of, it's an archive, but there's also a sort of small online shop, and there's a particular guy who's died who has an amazing selection of music, and I saw this and picked it up, and we listened to a track called California My Way. Willie Hutch, very much the sort of early 70s Marvin kind of vibe. Willie Hutch also, as you can see, a guitarist. I'm actually modelling a bit of a Little Beaver look here.
I was thinking very Little Beaver. Yeah.
But yeah, very nice album, and one that I haven't come across before.
It's got quite a distinctive voice and a distinctive guitar style.
Yeah.
As well. Then we went Prince, really. Don't really need to say why we like Prince, but we love Prince here. And just played Alphabet Street, which I played a few weeks ago. Just suddenly thought, God, this is such a weird track, really. It's just like a complete pop track, but it was a single, wasn't it? It was in the charts. But underneath this, there's always kind of slap bass stuff going on. And so much happening on these records, actually. They're kind of like, they sound more amazing, I think, the older they get, actually. So anyway, Love Sexy. Probably, for me, the last absolutely essential Prince record, possibly Sign of the Times as well. But he was just absolutely so creative during this time as well. So Alphabet Street.
Amazing. So, Raphael Saadiq has a new album. I think his best since Instant Vintage. This is called Jimmy Lee, and it's all about his brother who had a lot of substance issues and died quite young. And this is an album sort of, I guess, responding to that tragedy. And lots of great tunes, but particularly the track This World Is Drunk, which for some reason really reminded me of Prince. There's just something about it. But yeah, Raphael Saadiq, he just completely ploughs his own furrow, and hugely talented. And yeah, I mean, I think he does okay, but maybe he's not as big as he should be, given how talented he is.
I think musicians know how good he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that track reminded me of Prince, but also weirdly reminded me of Pat Metheny at the same time. So I had a kind of weird shuffle underneath it. I can't remember what the connection was. We start to get a bit random sometimes towards the end of the session. But I played an album I bought and never really played very much, which is Walter Becker's Circus Money, which was his second solo record. Kind of not a huge favourite of mine, I have to say, but there's a track on here called Paging Audrey, which has got some great saxophone playing from Chris Potter on there as well. And I think Mark made a good point there. It does sound a little bit like a demo for a Steely Dan record. But,
very nice demo.
Very nice demo. Very luxurious demo, actually, considering the players on it. But yeah, it's a kind of odd record, actually. He plays a lot of very much reggae-influenced tracks. He was the one in the band who was more into reggae than anybody else, I think. But anyway, it's kind of worth it. I mean, you pick it up for probably £1 or $1, I should think, wherever you're looking for it. But anyway, Paging Audrey is a good, nice track off it.
This is an album that has come out, well, since the last video that we made. It's a soundtrack album of a film that I'm not sure has actually ever been screened anywhere, called The Italian Heist. And it's, previously unissued. Just has an amazing lineup of musicians. It was recorded, in 1978. It's got Monk Montgomery on the bass, Eric Gale and Wawa Watson on guitars, Jimmy Smith on the keyboards and Ndugu on the drums, and then the LA Horns, who I'm not sure who are in the LA Horns, but they sound pretty good. And just a great sort of, 70s blaxploitation, funky, moody soundtrack album. Quite short, but a great pressing and really worth discovering. We listened to Plutonium Heist.
Some debate about whether Monk Montgomery was the first person ever to play electric bass. Of course, we don't know. Then went for a kind of a bit of an old favourite, really. Went for Bobby Hutcherson's, from his album Knucklebeam, and went for his song Little Bee's Poem, which he's recorded in lots of different styles and over a different period of time. Just a great tune, really. And this is a great band. Very nice trumpet solo from Freddie Hubbard on here as well. But it's got George Cables, Hadley Callman, Eddie Marshall, all kinds of good people in here as well. It's kind of late period Blue Note for Bobby. Really awful cover, actually.
A couple of weeks back, I ended up having a stall at a record fair in Whitstable, and actually did sell a few records, not quite as many as I was hoping would go, but inevitably couldn't stop myself at the end actually buying a couple of records. And I bought this, which is the Spinners. It's called Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow. It's a Tom Bell production. And there's a track, basically the last track on side 2, called You're Throwing a Good Love Away, which it's just a kind of a weird groove. But Felipe Wynne, who some of you will know sings on Not Just Knee Deep by Funkadelic, does the amazing scat solo, kind of just appears towards about the last third of the tune and just absolutely takes off vocally. The rest of the Spinners are just kind of repeating this refrain, and Felipe is basically just improvising vocally, and it's a great tune.
There's a weird tension because he takes off, but the backing doesn't change at all.
No.
So it's almost like he's kind of gone off on one.
Yeah.
Really, which sounds great though. Then I don't know why. I think we had a break. We had a dog break after them. I think actually.
Oh yeah, had to put the dogs to bed.
Yeah, the dogs to bed. So played one more track actually, and just played. Just kind of sometimes it's good to remind us about where a lot of this stuff all comes from actually, and just played. It's quite easy to be a Robert Johnson collector because he really only made one record, and this is it actually. And played Hell Hand on My Tray all of here. Kind of classic. Couldn't be any more classic really.
No.
Really. Probably.
Right, well the last selection, now there's a VC member, I think he's called Motoric. Anyway, he was very excited. He got an original of this album, which is Midori Takada, called Through the Looking Glass. It's got the absolutely fantastic cover, and it got reissued a couple of years ago. I think it was never released on a CD. And it's very sort of ambient East meets West music. I mean, lots of kind of gongs and sort of bamboo flutes and gentle percussion, but very sort of meditative music. And actually sort of evolves across the album. And we listened to Mr. Henri Russo's Dream.
Which is a bit like the cover.
It is very much like the cover.
Yeah.
So
Cover looks like it's a cover actually a Russo painting. I never thought about that. No, it's not. I don't think. Somebody in the style of Russo anyway.
yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah, anyway. So, there we go.
But also kind of influenced by very Japanese in a way, in that it sounds like it's influenced by people like Takamitsu and all those kind of his film music. So very good.
John discovered he had it on a download.
Yeah, I think it did come out on CD after the vinyl. Actually.
Okay.
I have to say, it's amazing sounding. That was the best sounding pressing of the evening as well.
Did you think?
Well, it was so quiet.
Yeah.
It had to be quiet, really, because the music was very quiet.
Yeah. Keep tuning into the All Points show, which is now getting a bit of a live aspect to it. In fact, if anyone happens to be in Faversham on the 14th of December, come down to the Hot Tin and experience the All Points show in live session alongside somebody called Ash Walker. And we'll see you after Christmas.
Yeah, happy Christmas, happy New Year.
Definitely be a January edition.
Yeah.
The post-election selection.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting times.
Absolutely.
Don't get me started, I think.
No. keep staying with the music.
Yeah.